here on Mastering Dungeons, we are going to get into our main segment this week, which is our final look at Daggerheart. We have looked at some of the rules and some of the character creation stuff and some of the game mastering information and advice. And now we are going to get to the adversaries. I call that one of the three pillars of a game, right? It's the basic rules, it's the game loop or the game play, and then it's the monsters that are, or the adversaries that are brought to the game. So
Yeah.
we're going to talk about adversaries. But first, there will be one more playtest pack, we are told. Teos, you want to take that?
Yeah, so I watched the latest video with Spencer and Matt Mercer, and they went through a long discussion of everything that they're doing and their motivations. It's actually quite interesting. So the next update, there'll be this one. There's a new one that just came out that's a Point X update. Very minor adjustments to classes, barely perceptible changes. The next update will be 1.5, and it'll be the final open playtest packet. This introduces a campaign frames concept that is similar to the environments we're going to discuss today, with the idea that you can color a whole campaign to capture ideas like shadows or emerging across the land. They're going to revise and clarify druid beast forms. They're going to revise multiple ancestries so that each ancestry has like a top choice, the first one, and then the bottom feature. And you get the top from one and the bottom from the other so that you can't like do top and be too strong by trying to kind of they're trying to keep it balanced, and they talked a lot about this idea of balancing with a nod towards because maybe we might publish more if this game succeeds. So I thought that itself was interesting news that they, are looking at this as a game where they'd like to release more games down the road, more expansions to the line. So they're hoping for that balance to work out better that way. They are revising thresholds, that whole thing that decides how many hit points you're actually going to take based on whether the hit was a certain threshold. So now there will be 2 tiers instead of 3. They may also do away with evasion, try to simplify combat. But they really, if you're interested in design, they have a nice discussion about that sort of like simplification versus trying to be the sense that you're actually doing something on your turn. They ask GMs if anybody is doing long-term play or a long campaign or high-level play. They particularly would like more information on that. They talked about a bunch of broken builds that they asked people to submit, and they went through kind of how those work. It was funny because some of them relied on using multiple turns because of the idea that you can take more than one action in a row. So at the end of July, the open beta will be done, and they will move internally to create the game for 2025 launch. And Matt and Spencer said Daggerheart has been actually in development for a long time before the open beta. There have been various internal iterations. Spencer's working on a GM onboarding packet to make it easier for GMs to start with Daggerheart. And they want to help more DMs experience this kind of open play and collaboration. So they may have books that say, like, take this finished world, or he said a lot of books will say, take this finished world and use it, like Forgotten Realms, or tweak this outline of a world, and that both can be intimidating, which is funny because we think this is intimidating as well, but they are at least trying to provide another way that maybe is less intimidating. So it'll be interesting to see how that final version comes out. They did say that Demiplane will be updated for 1.5, and that all of it will be available until the game is out. So presumably in late July, when all of playtesting is over, or actually when the game comes out in 2025, when the game comes out in 2025, then we would lose those things. And at that point, you'd have to be a paying customer and, pay on Daggerheart, buy it on Demiplane, or buy it through Daggerheart.
Yep. All right. So with that, let's jump into this final talk where we're going to talk about adversaries and environments. For me, like I said, top 3 things a game needs to do well. Adversaries are in there because they are often the challenges against which the characters are going to test themselves. There are mechanics that can make a game engaging, and they are the tool that the game master brings to have their own fun and entertainment on the board, if you will. So good adversary design can be the difference between a good game that no one wants to run or a good game that lots of game masters want to run because they have this marvelous tool.
I really resonate with that. I hadn't really thought of it that way, Shawn, to be honest, but absolutely. And games, some games are a little polarizing, right? Like I would say Cipher System, some people find the lack of info around a monster to be very liberating. And the fact that actually the players make all the rolls, to me, the fact that I'm not really doing anything with them, I'm not making any rolls, and they're so simple makes them completely blah for me to run. I mean, not completely, but it takes away from my fun and reduces how much I want to run that game, which other people love running.
Yep, yep. So it's an important aspect, let's put it that way. It's an important
Yeah.
aspect of a game. So how does Daggerheart do adversaries? They have a stat block, as as 5e of course does, and as many games do. And what goes into a Daggerheart stat block will tell us how to use it and what might be fun or complex or frustrating about it. Let's take it one step at a time. We start with name. It's the creature's name. We're told an ability that affects a creature of that name affects all creatures with that name. I'm like, okay, that makes sense. But then we don't get anything like species. In D&D and in many other games, you will have, goblin hunter, and there will be a humanoid, comma goblin, or it's the fire breathing lava creature, and subtype dragon. Okay,
Yep.
that lets us do a lot of things with the rules. With the lack of that, and there is a type that we'll talk about later, but it's not that sort of type. Therefore, there's no way to say, oh, let's make a magical sword that does blank against dragons.
Right.
Because unless every name is going to say blah, 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 dragon, then we don't,
Right.
right?
Right. We get an assassin poisoner, but we don't know if they're elves or are they humans or are they nothing.
Plants.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's interesting because the name that they gave as an example and the stat block they gave as an example is the Jagged Knife Bandit. So unless every bandit is going to say something bandit,
Right.
then it's going to be hard to use that as a mechanic in the game. Uh, any thoughts on that so far? That's
No,
pretty
yep,
basic.
absolutely.
Okay. Next is tier, which is the strength of the creature in combat. There are 4 tiers: 0 tier adversaries, which are appropriate for level 1 characters. Then tier 1 monsters are for levels 2 through 4 characters. Tier 2, level 5 to 7 characters. And tier 3, level 8 to 10 characters. There is a section we are told called improvising adversaries that will tell us how to tweak monsters to make them work outside of their normal tier.
And it
Okay.
is interesting, having worked on Forge of Foes, that we took a look at sort of like, can you just sort of generalize what monsters do at a CR? And you can for D&D. And here they actually do that right there in the book, where they say, hey, here's what you can expect tier 3 to do. The benchmark for their damage is blah. You can make these couple of changes if you want to have this kind of effect, and here's what we expect to have. And then you get some information on actually even scaling the difficulty of them, which is very interesting approach. I don't love the way I feel like this is almost rushed how it's presented. Like they just tried to just chuck some information here versus make it useful. So I suspect this will all get updated and prettied because I would expect a lot of people would read this and go, boy, this just looks like noise. I can't even process this the way it's written. But I like the concept of it, that a little more like 4th edition are trying to tell you, look, there are these sort of stable bands and you can move between them and play with them. And done the right way, this could be really useful.
Yep. And speaking of like 4th edition, the next thing is the type. And as opposed to type being like species. Type is how special or what the role
Roll,
is, like we
yeah.
had for fourth edition. So bandits are standard. That's their type. But we will also have bruisers, hordes, leaders, minions, ranged, skulk, social, solo, standard, and support.
Hmm.
So those are types. Uh, and you can see how that might be useful just in terms of telling game masters this is the situation in which you will use this monster.
Yep.
The-
Yeah, and then next comes the description, which is just a one line, which is kind of neat. You know, some monsters don't, or some RPGs don't really do that, but this, you get a very short thing, like Assassin Poisoner says, a cunning scoundrel skilled in both poisons and ambushing. And after that, motives and tactics. And for the Assassin Poisoner, it's anticipate, taint food and water, disable, get paid. Okay.
Mhm. And tactics are escape, profit, and throw smoke.
For the Jagged Knife
And
Bandit, yeah.
and then it says there aren't special rules about this, and I'm thinking, why not? Because this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity to make special rules about this, rather than just saying to the game master, when when it's applicable, they escape. When it's applicable, they want to profit. When it's applicable, they're going to throw smoke.
Yeah.
But you're letting an opportunity go there where you can make special rules about this and add that to the turn order or add that to the action tracker, where if it is in their best interest to do blank, spend a fear and do the thing.
Yeah.
If they're doing exactly this. So that's just my thought.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. It is a little strange to have these, like, they, you know, they're almost like qualifiers that I guess can guide play. But, you know, like for example, Assassin Poisoner saying taint food and water. I mean, they can drop a smoke bomb. They clearly poison you as part of their damage, but nothing tells me something they can do to interact with food and water. So if this is their big motivation, I don't get how to do it within what the stat block tells me. And I guess
Right.
that's okay. You know, same thing with disable. I don't, you know, it's interesting. Yeah.
Because later we're going to have experiences. And experiences are like the character's experiences where you get to add a number
Right.
to it if they do the thing. So this seems, if you're going to have experiences, put this down with experiences or meld the two in some way to make them
Right. Yeah, because
less
I mean that's what you
separate.
would have thought this would have been, is actually experiences, because
Mhm.
in the character side this would be an experience, right? Get
Mhm.
paid is my experience, and anytime I'm trying to get paid, I would get plus blah to the roll, right? But yeah, here it's separate. It's interesting.
Attack modifier, pretty much just the attack bonus or attack penalty to their D20 attack rolls. For the Jagged Knife Bandits, they get to add a +1 to their D20 roll. And I like the simplicity of this. Um, there's if you want it to be a more narrative game, then you need to simplify the rules a bit, especially for the game master. So just say when they do things, they're +1, and if their experience comes in, they're a +2 more,
Yeah.
and let it go at that. Weapons. We get a list of the weapons that the creatures can use and the damage the weapons do. The Jagged Knife Bandit only has daggers, and it's marked melee only. It doesn't say melee only, it just says melee.
Hmm.
So that makes me say, well, do they have a ranged attack? Do they need a ranged attack? Because
If they
one of their
did, it'd be
things is
the same attack modifier, but yes, the daggers are apparently melee, which is strange because can't you throw a dagger? So, hmm.
right. And I understand why, because these guys are specifically made to jump down upon you
Right.
because that's their thing, right? They leap out of trees, they jump down from roofs, they do this sort of thing. So you want them story-wise to always be leaping upon you. So I can understand why you don't want that story-wise, but as we know, things rarely go as you plan for a game master. And
Yeah.
there will be situations where they can't do this. So why not give them something? I I understand it, but I'm trying, my game design brain is trying to
Oh yeah.
see all the
Yeah.
problems that could be
Right.
foisted upon the game master at
And
the table.
you know, and fourth edition found this, right? And fifth edition to some extent, though I think a lot of the monsters had learned from fourth edition were, yeah, if you don't give them anything ranged, then characters will run away from them or find builds that allow them to do that. And then these are just the lamest monster to run because you're every round you have to run towards the party and doing nothing. You know, you're just sitting there running and you'll probably get killed or held or something and never actually make it into the battle.
Yeah. And and again, my game design brain is going, but that's okay because this game, if you are using a jagged knife bandit, this game says if they cannot do the thing they want to do and they can't attack, they're going to try to escape. But then, as a game master across various games, I know that escape is no fun.
Hmm.
Escape is not a fun mechanic in any way. So I'm going back and forth.
Yep.
Uh, what else do we have? We have difficulty.
Yeah.
This is the number that's needed to hit a creature or otherwise affect it. So with bandits, you are trying to get a 12 or higher. And like the attack modifier, I'm okay with one number to rule them all.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
kind of neat. You know, you're
yeah,
trying to sweet talk them or hit them or do whatever. There's your
yeah,
number, right?
yeah. Each monster has a damage, a threshold, hit points, and stress, just like the characters did when we covered that. It's all there. And then we get to the experience, where a bonus can be applied to numbers or rolls for a creature that taps into their experience. And so a bandit +2 is what the jagged knife bandit has. Anything that anytime
Banditing?
they're doing bandity things, they get a +2. This is where I'm like, what does this exactly mean?
Yeah. Yeah, that is really interesting. And um I think the idea is they always do that and they're not spending like fear to trigger that, if I understand it correctly. Right? Because an experience that a
Yeah,
character has, you spend hope to use it.
right.
And was one of our questions last week. I think in this case, they're saying that you can always use it.
Yeah, I couldn't, if it's in there, it wasn't in a place that was easy to find. And the
Yeah.
question for me is then, if every time they attack, would they get that +2? Because yeah,
Banditing.
bandits attack things, so they're attacking, so therefore +2. Uh, and I don't know if
Yeah,
that's what it
there's a disconnect
means.
here, right? Like either your experience
Yeah,
should be for certain parts of the game, or really if it's always, well then just put it up top in the attack and get rid of this because
right.
and it's again interesting because you know we had these three moves in Tactus: escape, profit, throw smoke. That could make a lot more sense to say that that gets these experience. That would be the experiences that get +2 when you're doing that kind of stuff.
Mm,
It's interesting. Hmm.
yeah. Then we get features. So features are special things that the creature can do, and they are divided into three different types. There are passive features that are always active. There are action features that require an action to use, and there are reactions that can be done in response to something else. So those right there, we're like, okay, I think I can handle this. There are three different things. Okay. But when you delve into each of them, you realize that some of them might require a fear spend, some of them might require a stress spend, some of them might require a full action from the action token, some of them may require all of those or some of those. And so it gets just a touch complicated um, when you are trying to say run a combat that has three different
Right.
Right, you're running three different kinds of creatures in a combat, and each of them has three or four different features that all work
Yeah.
slightly differently. It's not going to be quick. It's going to take a lot of cognitive load, I think.
Yeah, and they're clearly trying to be just meaty enough, but also simplify, right? So you have this, if you look at the stat blog, and we'll have a couple examples in our show notes, like the Assassin Poisoner has these features, and it has, whereas I guess the Jagged Knife Bandit has features too. So the Jagged Knife Bandit has Climber, which is passive. They can climb as easily as they can run. And then we get a flavorful quote, they get to higher ground. So they like to climb, okay, and I guess it just means you can just move up, right? You know,
Mhm.
you have a climb
Mhm.
speed essentially. Then from above is an action. Make an attack from above a target. On a success, deal 3d10 physical damage. They should want to move up the wall, attack you from up above, but it's got to be melee. So I guess they're just kind of clambering up walls
This is
around you.
leaping down, right?
Yeah, or maybe just even attack. It does nothing says they can't hold on with one hand and dagger with the other. I guess I don't
Right.
know. And they're dealing 3d10 physical, so that's pretty strong compared to the 2d6. That's a so it should just always move up a wall, I guess. And there's no check, so cool. It's like a spider. The Assassin Poisoner has um, a smoke bomb, which is kind of neat. Drop a smoke bomb that fills the area within close range of smoke, making all targets dizzied. Dizzied characters add 2 tokens to the action tracker when they act, then are no longer dizzied. So you get the DM ends up getting more actions that way. So yeah, it is this kind of balance, right? That you'll have 3 or 4 things that you have to sort of pay attention to. What's passive and always on? What's an action that you might spend, and then your trackers. I find it overall, I think this is a decent balance, right? Because one thing that you don't want, you want the PCs and monsters to feel somewhat similar, right? If PCs are doing all these great tricks, this happens in 5th edition sometimes, where I think 5th edition is the monsters in the monster manual are a little too boring because the PCs are doing all these interesting things, and the monster just hits you with your club again, and then it does that again, and it just ceases to feel like it is whatever it is. What's holding that club? Is it a troglodyte? Is it a giant? Let's just club damage, right? And I I miss often, and that's part of what we did with Forge of Foes. This idea of like, when a giant hits you, it might send you flying or knock you prone, or it stomps the ground and several of you around it fall down, right? That kind of stuff that really communicates what a monster is. And I like that they're trying to do that, where they're saying this is, a bandit, and they're giving you banditry stuff. And you're jumping on walls and attacking from above. And if you're an assassin poisoner, you're hitting with poison, making them vulnerable. And then you're dropping smoke bombs, and you get bonus advantage when you're hidden. Great. I'm all for that.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. It's that balance of how easy is it to keep track of at the table as you're playing.
Yeah.
That's my question.
Yeah.
Because in
Yeah.
5e, it's pretty easy, right? To add the stomp and fall because you're just like, okay, you're prone, you're prone, you're prone. I don't need to keep track of stress or fear or action tracker moving things off. Oh no, I need to spend 2 fear to take the action. And now how many fear do I, right? There's a lot of
Yeah.
currency that's being played with in
Sure.
this, as opposed to a game like 5e, where you can just say, it does this and you're prone.
Yeah, and one thing that's neat, it's very Forge of Foes, is that you can use the. We talked about how up above, and then this early in this section, they give you these sort of like, here are the thresholds for different tiers of what's expected. Well, then they don't have this yet, but they have a placeholder that says here there will be a bunch of features that are you know common to our various monsters. So you could actually just take that stat block shell that they gave you up above and make your own very easily, right? Because you could take, oh, it's going to be a tier 2, so I'm going to take those thresholds and information and put those all down on the left side of the stat block, and then I'm going to add these features that I think is cool, and I've just made a monster, right?
Mhm.
And that's a really neat idea. It's
Yeah.
that whole monster powers plus a table kind of concept. So I like that idea. That can be fun. That's a lot of fun play, right? The equivalent of making characters, where you just are told by the game, hey, make monsters and have fun with that. And along those lines, that kind of segues into the environment side, if you want to talk about that next.
Sure do. So just like adversaries have a stat block, environments will have a stat block. And this is basically creating encounters within a form, which I am really, really intrigued with. Because the more that you can take and put something in a shell that's easy for game masters to see, uh, I'm for that. So what's in an environment stat block? Well, we are given an example of a baronial court, the court of a baron. We have a name, of course, self-explanatory. Now we have a type. Types for the monsters were solo and standard and so on. A type for an environment is essentially one of the pillars of play for 5th edition. So you have your social environment, your exploration environment, your traversal environment, your event environment.
Yeah.
So the baronial court is a social environment. So social type play is more likely to happen there. That doesn't mean you can't have combats there. It just means that this is where you would expect social encounters to happen.
Yep.
Like adversaries, the environments have tiers from 0 to 3. The baronial court, we are told, is a 0.
Yeah, so we've got the description, and this is kind of like with monsters. We get an evocative one sentence, the bustling court of the baron, lavishly decorated with tapestries, crystal goblets, and attendees dressed in finery. And then we have a tone and feel. So these are the emotional beats and sensory details. Playful yet tense, rich with the smell of food, perfume, and wine. Okay. Yep.
Mm-hmm. My only small tiny nit here is you already have a description. The tone and feel seems just either make the tone and feel something that mechanically I can play with. If I spend a fear, I can do something with this.
I like that.
Otherwise, it's just really a part of the description.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
And we get a difficulty just as with the adversaries. So environments have an overall thing, and you can see like, okay, if you're trying to make social moves or trying to see someone through the crowd, right? This all ends up using the same difficulty. If this were a lava pool area, then that would be the DC to do various things, see through the smoke and haze and jump over a pool or whatever it might be. So you can use that general difficulty.
And we get potential adversaries who might be found in this environment. So in this case, it's a courtier, a merchant, a petty noble, the bladed guards of the baronial court, which just helps you as the game master flesh out an encounter set here.
Yep.
And then we get features. And just like with adversaries, these features are passive, active, or reactive types. For the baronial court, we get these features. A passive feature called You Scratch My Back, where a PC may gain advantage on a presence roll if they offer or cash in a favor. If the PC fails to deliver on repaying a favor, the game master takes 2 fear. And the questions around this are, what secrets are concealed within the favors requested? How long does the PC have to make good on this promise? And it's one of those things where my first reaction is, cool, I see what you're doing here.
Mm-hmm.
My second reaction is, how many game masters are going to be able to, from that, really put together something that is meaningful beyond just the surface?
Absolutely. And I've ran a lot of adventures that try to do this, especially for social. I mean, I appreciate that they use this sort of social example because it's the hardest, right? It's one thing to say, jagged peaks and oh, when you move, make a check or it's difficult terrain. That's kind of easy, right? Here, you're really trying to evoke certain types of behaviors and tactics. And there are kind of 2 things that often happen. One is, to what extent should the DM tell everybody all of this?
Mm-hmm.
So should I just print this out and say, hey, everybody, you have a "you scratch my back" feature in play, and maybe some of the other ones I'm sharing as well. So which ones am I sharing? Or are they secret and I'm somehow trying to, as a DM in my multitasking layers, also have over here a, hey, let them know that this thing activates, and they kind of unlock it and learn about it, right? So like gossip, the reaction. When a character fails a presence roll with fear, they must mark stress as their failure becomes the hot their failure becomes the hot gossip for the evening. That's more fun as a reveal. So now I've got to really like have that on my side, and I'm tracking it, and I'm trying to. But the second issue I have, so one is, when do you disclose these things, becomes like a more prep, more overhead, more that's in your brain stack. But also the when these things do unlock, whether they should then be things the players do over and over again, right? So like, if you offer a favor, should you be offering favors constantly because there's this "you scratch my back" passive ability? Is that supposed to drive play? And I've had tough experiences in adventures when I'm trying to kind of decide, did the author really intend for this kind of to be, right? It's all about offering favors. Or is this just a random thing that is out there? But then why is it taking up so much space? You know, like I struggle with that a lot.
Yeah. How this stat block is used is the question I have, because some game masters might say, "Oh, cool, I have the stat block." I pull it down and they're running at the table, and then they're reading, going, "Oh, wait, I have to have a repayment of this favor, and there's a secret involved. What's the
Yeah.
secret? Oh, the framed action. Oh, cool, I'm going to spend a fear and take the framed action. Okay, somebody at the court's going to frame the PCs for a crime, real or imagined, and then proving their innocence requires completing a progress countdown of 6." And then my brain's spinning. I'm like, wait. So this is like a great prompt to help a game master create something within a story, but it's not something that you want the game master to try to use on the fly, because all they're going to do is put themselves in a corner, and it's going to just be awkward unless they are like the top tier premier
Yeah.
pull
Yeah.
things out of my butt and make them
Yeah.
great
Well,
DMs of all time.
one of the benefits I just did a video on conventions, and one of the benefits of being at conventions is you often run the same adventure. If you're doing organized play or running for some company, you run the same adventure over and over again. And what I've often found is the first time I run an adventure that has things like this, I'm trying to run off this menu.
Mhm.
The second time, I will take something off the menu and just be like, you know what, this doesn't add to it. And then I'm just sort of really rolling on eventually, when the best game I'll run is probably the second or third one, where I just act like these things aren't written down and they're
Mhm.
just in my head guiding my adjudication of play. And that's honestly what I would expect more from a Powered by the Apocalypse type game or a more narrative type game than these sort of almost environment powers that are here, because they intersect weirdly with whatever the overall. You've come to this baronial court for some reason,
Mhm.
and that's what should kind of really drive play. These things feel like they might fight it, right? And often are, or they're a strange expression of how that play should progress, because they're made into these feature type things rather than whatever it is, right? I mean, because I could say you must go to the baronial court, but your main adversary or their lackey will at some point frame you. We'll choose one of the characters and frame them. In fact, I should already know what they're going to frame them about because I know the characters so well, right? Because this is such a character heavy narrative game. So that's just going to happen, right? I don't need a feature block for this. That's just going to happen after the dance, the first dance concludes. That's just going to happen. You know, it's I feel like this is almost too constructed and it'll get in the way of good play. At least that's what I've found when I run things like this. By the third time, I am not using a menu of options. I'm structuring the play, and it feels so
Right.
good and elegant and non-intrusive. But it takes getting to that third time because it's too much of a framework.
Yeah. you put things in stat blocks to be useful in the moment. You don't put things in stat blocks to be a prompt to do things later. So
Yeah. Yeah.
if this is a
Mm-hmm.
here are some ideas that you can do, like Framed, for example, that's a whole adventure,
Yeah.
right? That's something where I need to sit down and I need to know, and they ask the right questions. How do the antagonists sell the lie to make the court believe the PCs are at fault? Who's really responsible for the crime? How did it even happen? Is it a half truth? Great questions. They
Yeah.
will help prompt me to create an adventure 7 hours before I run this game and get all these details worked out and have this progress countdown set up to be the adventure as they have to follow clues to prove their innocence by proving that the guard is lying, by proving that the weapon that was planted on them is not theirs, right? All of
Yeah.
these things. So it's not just okay, make a presence roll, okay, make a blank roll. Okay, make this
Yeah.
roll. Oh, okay, now it's all sorted out. That's just the old skill challenge from
Yeah.
4E written and performed badly.
Well, and I think that actually skill challenge is not a bad parallel because or is, let's say it is a good parallel because when you look at what they do in chapter 6, they describe both for adversaries and for environments how to build them. And so they'll say, hey, let's start with you're going to do something in a bustling marketplace. So you literally have bustling marketplace and then you have prompts, description, tone and feel, tier, type, difficulty. And you start massaging it and they actually walk you through how this fictitious DM goes through this process and goes, okay, here's what's happening in the bustling marketplace. So that's my description. Here's the tone and feel. And then they start working through various features and it walks through the mindset of doing that. So the good news is if you can find the way to massage, you don't just have to take the pre-made things. They'll have a list of them and and they're encouraging you to make your own. So in theory, what you could have is almost like the way a skill challenge can just say, hey, you're trying to get through this wilderness. Here are a few pointers. You can improvise this, right? That can work in this sense, in that you could say, take a scene that would be 2 pages of adventure text, and you could have it that the environment is actually the adventure text, right? So we've got a bustling marketplace. You gain advantage by offering gold as part of any interaction. There's going to be a crowd that can come in and split the party, and that might cause them to end up in different places. And you can reveal a new find, and a thief's going to try to take something from you. And that's the marketplace adventure, right? Or scene. That's the encounter, is actually this environment stat block. And I think this is one of these places we're going to have to experiment and play with it to see how it works, right? You have potential adversaries. This is like it's a weird mix of stat block, shorthand, inspiration.
Shorthand.
What's that?
Yeah. And a shorthand of a written encounter.
Yeah. And so how you play off of it is a big deal. And the idea that they want you to customize it, I think, is actually quite helpful, because that's where maybe what a DM can do is just say, well, I'm just taking this little tiny block, it's half a page, and that's my encounter, because I will add things as needed from my potential adversaries if things go that way, or if we have NPCs to meet. And I will play off of what the character's like, and I'm making it all up on the spot. If you're comfortable with that, then this could actually be really neat. You're not working with pages of text, you're just doing this. I think if you're doing both, then I find it will really not work. And what's funny is I suspect, I haven't looked closely enough at their adventures, but I would bet that their adventures don't just give you a bustling marketplace and have fun. They also give you adventure text. And then there is that conflict, right? Where it's like, what am I looking at? Am I looking at this? Am I looking at the text? Am I looking at what's in my head? And in those situations, I go back and say, well, just go with what's in, you need to somehow know it well enough to just run it smoothly off your head. This won't help you. But maybe it does if this is actually your notes. If this is your outline from which you run everything, then that could possibly work.
Yeah, my final note there on this was the same thing. It's like, I love the idea of this shorthand. I would need to think on it. I would need to actually sit and use it repeatedly to see what's it missing, what doesn't it need, to just get me what I need to get through this encounter in a entertaining and productive way.
Yeah. And we can see that, after this section, there are a bunch of to-dos where they say everything below is not available in this version of the manuscript. List of environment features, homebrew guide, custom domain cards, custom adversaries, custom equipment, card templates. So they're clearly giving you a lot of how-to in this game.
Yeah.
At least that's what they so far expect to do. So that you could customize all this stuff. And then they have an appendix full of all kinds of things, the decks, the important terms, character sheets, and all of that. And that's really the game, Shawn.
Yeah. Yep. I am.
So.
Yeah. Let's get some final thoughts here. I am really big on telling the game master in the book how to use these rules. Make this an instruction manual more than anything else. And knowing that Spencer Stark wrote Alice is Missing, which is a small box game, but the instructions are very clear. It's laid out quite well. So he obviously knows how to do that. The question is, will he, with the resources that he has, which I assume are quite extensive coming from Critical Role and Darrington Press, that they will be able to do this. It's just how complex will the game be in order to have to explain. And that's where, so I am very excited about this game. I like where it started from, and I like where it is right now. I like the changes that they've made from version to version. They didn't when they made a mistake, letting someone roll a D20 with advantage instead of the D6, they changed it back once they saw how the math worked.
Yeah.
So I think it's gotten to a point where it's taken new design and it's taken design from existing games and melded them together nicely. Now is going to be the hard part. Now is going to be realizing where the things you've taken don't work because of the other choices you've made, and getting a system where you've taken the indie parts and melded them with the rules heavy system in a way that really works, as opposed to a game master having to go out of their way to make it work.
Yeah. Yeah. The first thing that I saw when I looked at this game was you telling me that the text is telling me it's a narrative game. And then I hit all this crunch. And then as I get to the game master section, it surprises me with these narrative pieces like, oh, you're not running an adventure that you planned ahead of time. You are improvising from session to session, right? Remaking your what will happen next decision before each session to play. And, oh, look, the environments are these kinds of things you riff off of, and just everything felt like a surprise. And so when they talk about going back and doing like a GM starter kit or whatever, I hope, and that's one of the things that I've been sending and feed, everything I'm saying are things that I've said to them in my feedback, playtest feedback. So hopefully they will go back and make it so it isn't a new layer has been revealed. You expect that based on what the game is telling you from the very beginning of how it works, and that those examples of play really reflect whatever their intention is and help people get to that, regardless of how comfortable they are with it, right? Right now, you can just hit a section of the book and just bounce off of it because you go, whoa, that's scary to me as a GM, or isn't my favorite style, or my players may not like that, whatever it is. So a lot of it, I agree with you, like that kind of, if they can just clarify it and work it so that it meets those expectations, that's great. I think that for level 0, for level 1, whatever you want to call it, when you start your character, those characters are too complex. Same problem as 5th edition, especially for a narrative game. I don't know why we have this many features. Like, yes, it can be fun, but it's more than, none of us in any of the games that I've played, none of us knew our characters 100%. There's just too much on the sheet for you to know what's going on in the first session. Why would you want that? What's the point of that? And maybe you'd say, well, the point is that you'll want to dig into it more. I give it let me level and then give me that, right? Like, let me be, especially when I'm supposed to be focused on the narrative of things, then don't overwhelm me with the crunch of things. And I really think they should almost, make it like Shadow the Demon Lord is essentially a 10 level game with a level 0.
Mhm.
That's a very
Yep.
smart thing to do. Where you have that optional level 0, that if you're fairly new to the game, you start at level 0 and you get far fewer things.
Yep.
That would go a long way towards making this game easier to run at conventions, easier to start with your group, and then you can have a little more headspace to deal with the narrative angle of things. I think that would go a long way towards making me happier. There's a little bit of a bet on this. It's like a risky bet, and I admire that in what they're doing. That they're hoping that the crunch is going to be stuff that you want to really sink your teeth into and have fun with while you have this narrative layer. Will that result in a game that's really adopted? Maybe, right? Like it could be a really smart move, but we're going to have to see. Like, there are a lot I think a lot of the folks we hear talking to, when we explain this game or they listen to the show, they say, I'm not sure if that's for me.
Yeah.
And we're not sure about whether this game is going to have that kind of wide appeal or not. We'll have to see.
Right. You have to make a game that game masters can and want to run and continue to run.
Yeah.
And if there's too much weight, whether that weight is what the game master has to do or in helping the players learn how to play their characters, all of that weight is a detriment to getting your game run.
Yeah.
And so it needs to be pared down, and it, like you say, with character creation and with explaining how to run a campaign. It needs to be simplified, pared down. Game masters, once they learn, can expand.
Yeah.
But they need to learn what's great about this game.
Yeah.
And be shown how to run that, and then expand from there.
Yeah, and they also need to work on their playtest adventures must reflect their actual game, not look like D&D adventures. And they're not the only company to make that mistake.
Yeah.
But if you can't tell me what your game looks like in written form to actually be your game, then maybe you're, like there's a problem there.
Yeah.
Because if I'm supposed to be riffing off of this marketplace, then your printed adventure needs to just have the marketplace and show me how to riff off of that, help me get there.
Yep.
If you're going to give me a fully structured thing and an environment on top of it, now I'm in that weird mode where you've just kind of appended something into a D&D adventure. Make your kind of adventure. And I'd like to, and that's important. We need to see that so we know what we're supposed to make, right? If this is all outlines and whatever, then great. Show me a published version that looks like that so I know that's what the expectation is. That would be really helpful. I think we need to see that, not just these examples of play, because it is different enough that folks want to see that.
For sure. Any other final thoughts, or are we good to put Daggerheart over here for now?
Put it back in our sheath. It's been fun. I mean, I think we didn't expect to do this many episodes, but it was really such a great sort of way to talk about these larger design topics. And now we're going to have to go back and think about what we talk about. So I don't know, Shawn.
Yeah.
Hopefully folks in our Discord will have some ideas.
Yeah. Let us know what you want us to cover next. It probably won't be a game because we've just done that. So maybe we'll take a break and go off in a couple of other directions before we really sink our teeth into something too deeply. But that's up to you, and it's up to our patrons. And if you would like to become a patron of the show and tell us what you want to hear, you can do so by going to patreon.com/masteringdnd. And we like to thank our patrons, whether they are Master of Dungeons patrons, thank you so much. Master of Realms patrons, they get a shout out in our show notes. And our Masters of the Multiverse, well, they get a special shout out like this. Keith Ammon of The Monsters Know What They're Doing. Lou Anders of Lazy Wolf Studios. Craig Bailey, David Bastiensen, Steve Bissonette, Merrick Blackman, Calvin Bridges Avalos, Evil John, Will Doyle, Andy Edmonds at nerdronomicon.com, The Mighty Jerd, Ben Heisler and Paige Lightman, Sean Hurst, Brian King, Jim Klingler, a.k.a. DM Prime Mover, Chad Lynch, Paul Mata, The Mathemagician, Eric Mengi, Trey McLemore, John Mickey, Sean Molly, Falcon Neal, Tom Nelson of the Deck of Player Safety, Mike Olson, the Mighty Zeus, Post Fiction RPG Audio, Robert Pasley, Vladimir Prenner from Croatia, Chance Russo at Drago Russo, Ross Sandberg, Andy Shockney, Krishna Simonse, Josh, and Lawanika of the Tabletop Journeys podcast, featuring interviews, actual plays, and discussions to help make your next role legendary. Jeremy Talaman from the D&D and TV podcast, Trace, Joe Tyler, Marcelo de Velasquez, the Valiant DM, James Walton, Graham Ward, Javier Waziak, and Chris Webster. Thank you so much for your support. Again, you can go to patreon.com/masteringdnd, talk to us directly, join our Discord server where you can talk with many fine folks who are on top of things, folks, let me tell you. You can also leave us a review on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And you can also subscribe and like and do all those things on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/@masteringdungeons. Teos, what you been up to?
Ooh, I just put out a new Success in RPGs, asking the question of whether, as a creator, we should go to conventions. I look at the costs, I look at the benefits, how to make the most of it. So that just aired today.
Interesting. I'm going to go read that to see what you say. And you can find me on all the socials at Shawn Merwin, and also check out the podcast itself on the socials at Mastering DND. And of course, you can go to YouTube and see our beautiful faces there. So we are finished with Daggerheart. The dagger has been driven into our heart. We are ready to move on to the next life where we will do something else in game design. So what should we do now, though, Teos?
Well, I'm going to start reading Cinnabar, preparing for our next RPG coverage.
I'm going to do a page-by-page review of Vecna Eye of Ruin, or Eve of Ruin, just to see if there are any like contractions that were elongated.
Ooh, yeah. And maybe like a 50 episode series on it.
There you go.
Frost made into shame.
Aha.